Okay, we have opened the doors, so to speak, and people are coming in. Good morning. All right, give a couple more seconds, and 10:01, I'm going to start. Welcome everyone to the penultimate webinar for the Lighting Design Lab this year. We've got one more left until we take a little rest for the holiday time. And this webinar is going to be on building systems. We have Grace and Alissa from Glumac here to share their extensive knowledge. They've got some good, um, uh, oh my gosh, some good projects that we're going to take, case studies. It did come to me finally, case studies that we're going to take a look at, which I always like to see in application. Okay, and there's the click. We're going to do a little Slido poll at the beginning just to make sure everybody's listening. So take out your devices, phone, or you can open up a browser and type in slido.com if that's easier for you. And if you do it that way, you're going to have to type in two different codes. It's very annoying. The first one, 3435113, is to tell Slido which poll you're trying to get into. And then that little passcode that's so small, the TUYSJL, allows you to submit your answers. Maybe they'll get some efficiencies in the next year. But before we get to the poll, just really quick, if you haven't had a webinar with us before at the Lighting Design Lab, all y'all attendees are on mute. I'm not from Nashville, but my sister did live there for a while, and I inherited some y'all, I guess. You can submit questions at any time. Alissa and Grace are going to have a Q&A section at the end, but if you have any like super clarifying questions, we can get those answered um, in time. And this is being recorded, so if you have to step away or if you want to share this after the fact, a colleague wasn't able to attend or whatever, this will be up on our website within about a week. If you don't see it, it is me that is responsible for putting it up, so I will message me and remind me. And there's a survey after class. It's like 6 questions, especially if you're new to the lab webinars. Would love to hear your ideas. Where you ask questions, there's that little question mark in a bubble. Find that before we get started. That's where you ask questions to us. This chat icon, it won't work for you. We might push out some information or URLs or something, and that will be in the chat box, but you can't use that to talk to us. Okay. Um, the Line Design Lab, in case you didn't know, there's lots of familiar faces on the names on here, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. And so there are lots of BPA people on the call today, so I do want to shout out. This was a collaboration between BPA and a bunch of the Northwest utilities initially. It's since transformed into just a city light program, but this was a huge effort of stakeholders at the beginning, and we continue to work with everybody. We're just housed in City Light now. Our last webinar for the year is going to be on iron battery technologies. We're going to have a iron air battery company and an iron flow battery company come talk about utility scale storage. It should be interesting, but also a little bit niche for that technology. And now is the Slido. Here's the Slido code again. I'm going to leave it up for, I don't know, 15 more seconds. And then we're going to get to the very important questions. There are just 3. They're pretty easy. I'm going to give 5 more seconds. Okay. What, oops, I think I skipped a slide. This was the second one. But what best represents the type of work you do? If you don't see, you know, who you are, what you do, there's an other category. We still care about you. Um, I, I often join webinars just because I'm interested in the presentation, not because I actually do that work. Um, oops, it went to the next slide. All right, I'm gonna stay on this one and then I'll go back to the last one, Alissa and Grace, so you can see how people answered. Manatee Awareness Month. I saw yesterday that it's Manatee Awareness Month. Are you aware of what a manatee is? And I would not be surprised if there are people who don't. My husband, this is recorded, so he could see this, I guess. My husband told our child one time that there was no such thing as a whale shark, and he's a grown up. So I'm sure there are people who don't know what a manatee is. I Thank you for being honest that you're not interested in that. There we go. Okay. The type of work you do. So lots of program implementers and others, but plenty of engineers, architects, building owners, and contractors for you guys to talk to. All right, and that is it for me. Um, and Grace, you can just start sharing from your deck. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy this presentation. I will pop back in at the end to say goodbye.
All right, thank you guys so much for being here this morning. It's great to see so many people online. So our talk today is going to be on different building rating systems, covering both sustainability-based systems and also those focused on more health and wellness of the occupants. I'm Alissa Feucht. I'm a senior sustainability strategist at Glumac in the built environment space for, oh my goodness, almost 20 years now, which is scary. But have like experience in energy modeling and engineering before really focusing in over on sustainability. And it's my day-to-day now from working on certification systems to broader sustainability and climate action planning. A lot of mostly local projects because thankfully we've got a lot going on in our state. And I'll let Grace go ahead and introduce herself.
Thanks, Alissa. Good morning, everyone. I'm Grace Peterson. I'm a sustainability strategist with Glumac. I've been working in the built environments for about six or 7 years, previously working on the construction side, but I'm very glad to be working with Alissa on the sustainability side and excited to talk to you all today about rating systems.
Yeah, so today we're going to give just a brief introduction on Glumac and the kind of work we get to do, make a case for why do building certifications make sense, and then give an overview on some of the rating systems that we see most commonly used within our local area. And so really focus in mostly on LEED and also Living Building Challenge, but also touching base on WELL, Fitwel, and just a glance at a couple of the others we're seeing before at the end diving into 4 different case studies that are all local. So Glumac, we are engineers for a sustainable future. We have been doing engineering for a very long time and have over 300 plus engineers and building science specialists located mostly up and down the West Coast, from Seattle to San Diego, and we now have an Austin office as well as a national office coming out of the pandemic. So very spread out, but mostly West Coast based. Very focused in on sustainability. We have a ton of LEED accredited professionals and then kind of made a push for more Living Future accredited professionals this past year. So have over 10, which is great. Been working on LEED projects for a very long time and have also touched WELL Living Building Challenge and Fitwel projects. So our services really, we have an engineering side and then a building sciences side to Glumac. And so our engineering services are your typical mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering. And our building sciences group is now made up of the sustainability team, which Grace and I are both a part of. Our energy team really focused in on energy modeling for code compliance, as well as some of the certifications. Also doing early computational modeling. We have a new building enclosures group that we're really excited about, and our commissioning team, which is very strong up in the Seattle area. Some additional enhanced services that we get to work on as well. We've got a great lighting design group that's beyond just kind of like your typical, I guess, engineering lighting, their actual architectural lighting design group, as well as a technology integration group and construction administration. On the sustainability side of things, our work really does span the whole life cycle of the building, which is a lot of fun for us. So we can get in on projects from the planning phase. So this could be helping owners actually figure out what good sustainability goals are for their corporations or for their buildings. And so helping set goals that are typically more public facing, sometimes internal, but public facing going into their ESG, helping write some building sustainability standards, and then also our sustainability action planning and climate action planning work has really been taking off recently. And locally, we're getting to work with UW on that and the King County Library System. Design side, it's really focused in on the design of mostly buildings, but we do work in more of like transportation focused projects as well. So a lot of building certification work, embodied carbon LCA work, water modeling, which is great for say like gray water and rainwater system modeling. Not typically seeing a lot of black water systems happening in our area yet, but maybe one day. Also, we lead biophilic design workshops and focus in on climate adaptation and resilience design integration. Focusing more on the operations side of things, it's lead operations and maintenance certifications, zero certifications, and then operations tracking. So how is your building operating? Are you actually net zero energy? How you designed your building to? How are your water, like is your water systems working? So kind of tracking what is happening once your building is built.
Thanks, Alyssa. So getting into building certifications, let's kick things off talking about the benefits of building certifications, what we can call the business case. So we typically tend to see that certified buildings perform better. They use less energy and water, and they provide a better occupant experience. And there's a couple of data points that support this idea. These are all compared with an industry baseline. We see that certified buildings use 43% less energy, 35% less water, 10% reduction in operations and maintenance expenses, 7% higher property value, and 5 to 35 increased rental rates, and 18% increased worker productivity, or maybe in an educational setting, that's student learning outcomes. So there's a lot to consider in the way that engaging with a building certification can yield better operational building results, better data to understand those operational results, and myriad of increased occupant comfort benefits. Further, there are more benefits that we can consider from the developers and owners standpoint when it comes to legislative compliance. Uh, Understanding the operational data of a building can help that building up to be prepared for incoming building performance standards and energy benchmarking standards, as well as providing a corporate image value benefit and CSR requirements benefit. It's a great way to brag about the achievement of sustainable goals for a project, and a great way to highlight the initiatives pursued. So why are rating systems a good method to achieve sustainable building goals for a building? We have a sort of fourfold answer to this question. So firstly, rating systems can provide project teams with guardrails or a roadmap for their goals. Keeping the goals within the line of sight throughout the design phases and the construction phases. Whereas without a rating system, some great ideas might get lost in the sauce or VE'd out. Next, we have third-party review and credibility. So for most rating systems, there's a regulatory body that's responsible for reviewing the certification documentation and verifying the certification, which provides that added layer of verification for the owners and operators to assure that their building is everything they think it will be. Next, rating systems can help set basis for design, establish lessons learned, and tracking and measuring project successes. There's sort of a progressive elaboration with building certifications as more and more buildings get certified and more teams engage with certification. The knowledge is shared about sustainable building initiatives. For instance, if Alyssa and I are working with a project team on a certification and they're interested in a certain credit, we very often are able to say, we've achieved that credit before, we can help you write the spec for that. And that basis of understanding makes sustainable building easier to achieve. Next, we have driving market transformation. Again, as more buildings become certified and more teams engage with certification, the industry awareness is broadened and manufacturers know more about environmental product declarations. Waste haulers might know more about their diversion rates and recycling rates. And occupants come to expect sustainable buildings. And hopefully by engaging in these rating systems and certifications, we all drive the market toward more sustainable practice. So I'll hand it off to Alyssa for a brief overview.
Yeah, so some of the certifications we're going to look at today are on the screen. If you see that nice blue dotted line across the middle of the screen, that's kind of where Seattle Code is already trending us. So those of us local to Seattle, which I think most of us are based upon it being Seattle City Light putting on the webinar today, we're already getting towards probably like a LEED silver to gold baseline by achieving Seattle Code. That doesn't mean there aren't like low-lying credits that we would also be going after, but really just because honestly Seattle Energy Code is so stringent, it gets your building a good amount there. And then also depending upon your location and transportation related credits, if you're in the urban core, you tend to earn quite a few of those credits because of our good transportation systems locally. Towards the bottom side of the scale, we have our International Building Code, just kind of doing a little bit less bad. Fitwel is a health and wellness certification system focused really on the occupants within the building space. And so this is trying to just design spaces that people want to be in, make sure that they do have good air quality, good water quality, but also places to relax, places of activity. Just trying to create those nice spaces. The Fitwel certification, for the most part, it's not a testing-based certification. It's more you show how your building was designed, and that's how you earn points within that certification. And that's pretty similar to LEED certification as well. They're really design-based certifications until you move over into the LEED operations and maintenance side of things. Then you're starting to look at how your building is like actually operating in actuality. So once you move from the LEED column over to WELL, now there are more testing. There is testing that's going to start to be required within your buildings. So again, the WELL certification is focused on the health and wellness side of things, but you are testing your air quality, you are testing the water quality, and making sure that all the systems you've designed and put into place are actually happening and you're providing that quality air and water to the occupants. Once you move the next column over, you are looking at Living Building Challenge certification. And this certification, rather than the others that are kind of focused on doing less bad, this one is about doing good and kind of giving back to the environment. And so this is more of that regenerative design. So for full Living Building Challenge certification, which is pretty hard to achieve, you need to be net positive energy, so actually producing more energy than your building is utilizing. you need to be treating all of your water on site. And so this is it's looking beyond gray water, rainwater systems to how you are treating black water. And then there's also things incorporated in there about really healthy materials, and making sure that you're giving back to your local community and kind of being a place of refuge for either the occupants and ideally the local community, depending upon the program. I'll pass it back off to Grace, and we're going to dive in more on LEED.
Thanks, Alissa. Okay, so LEED. I'm sure many of you have heard of LEED, but as it's by far and away the most common rating system globally, it's worth spending some time reviewing. So you may or may not know that LEED is an acronym standing for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So just to start off with a brief overview of LEED, LEED is achieved in 4 levels of certification, the lowest being certified, then silver, gold, and platinum, and is achieved via credits within the thresholds you can see at the bottom left here. And credits or points are earned within these credit categories we can see on the left. So we'll go through these credit categories briefly. Integrative process is an optional credit, but one that's always encouraged. It invites as many of the members of the core project team as possible to engage very early in pre-design with the development goals, specifically around energy and water most often, but the idea being that you get as many core project team members in the room as possible and start thinking about the project goals and how they may play into the below credit categories. Next, we have location and transportation, which is concerned with how the occupants of the new building interact with the transportation infrastructure surrounding the site. We have sustainable sites, which is concerned with the ecological impacts of the development. We have water efficiency, which is concerned with the reduction of potable water use. We have energy and atmosphere, which is concerned with energy use and reduction of carbon emissions. We have materials and resources, which is concerned with the selection of materials that do less ecological harm on the environment. We have indoor environmental quality, which considers a lot of initiatives surrounding occupant comfort, including air quality, lighting controls, day lighting, quality views, and even thermal comfort. Then we have the innovation category, which invites project teams to make a selection from USGBC's innovation or pilot credit catalog, where they can think a little bit outside the box, outside the bounds of the typical LEED rating system if there's a special interest initiative the team is interested in exploring. And then there's regional priority credits, which are credits that USGBC assigns based on the project location. So existing credits within the rating system might be eligible for a bonus point if they are deemed, relevant to that project's location, such as a building in a drought susceptible location. The water saving credits might be worth higher value, and thus they might get an extra point for achieving those under regional priority. So we'll get a little bit deeper into the particulars of LEED. There's a lot here, so bear with me. Again, we have along the bottom the certification levels. And on the right-hand side, we can see here different versions of LEED. So the idea is that there is a rating system appropriate for each type of project. And of course, every project is different. But the idea is that project teams identify in pre-design what rating system is most appropriate for their development, and the required prerequisites and optional credits available within that rating system will make more sense in the context of the development. So we can see here there are many sub-variations within the building design and construction type, whereas there are some fewer variations in other rating system types. We see B, D, and C as the most common and the required rating system for new construction buildings. So moving on to a couple particulars of LEED and the way LEED operates, there's a point of confusion here with 2 organizations that are associated with LEED. So in short, GBCI, the Green Building Certification Incorporated, provides the third-party credentialing and certification of buildings and accreditation of individuals. So they review the LEED documentation and provide the certification. USGBC, the United States Green Building Council, supports the overall growth and development of LEED as a rating system and in the green building industry at large. Now, again, a point of clarification, a bit semantic, but buildings are certified and people are accredited. You may have noticed in the intro slides, AP after folks' names, that stands for accredited professional. I believe Alissa and I are both accredited professionals in the building design and construction rating system variation. So all LEED projects must meet the minimum program requirements of LEED, which are pretty minimal. The first of which is that buildings must be in a permanent location. The second, they must use reasonable LEED boundaries. And the third, they must comply with size requirements, which are usually a minimum size requirement, such as a new construction building that's 200 square feet likely can't pursue certification. So within all of these rating system variations, there are required prerequisites and there are optional credits, and project teams select credits to pursue in line with the points they need to meet their certification goal. And the sort of life cycle of a LEED project, credits, must be documented during design and construction phases. They may be submitted to GBCI in 2 review phases, design and construction, or they may be submitted together. But regardless of the submission approach, it's important for project teams to be engaging with their LEED pursuit early and often in the project. So again, it's recommended for project teams to engage in integrative process exercises very early in pre-design if possible, and then to be meeting regularly and having peer review from a certification manager such as Glumac throughout the design phases to assure that the design is being designed in line with the LEED pursuit, as well as construction phase administration, where the LEED consultant can meet with the contractor and ensure everybody understands the required tracking documentation. And like Alissa mentioned, for most LEED rating systems, the credit verification happens in design and construction, and then the certification is awarded at construction completion, whereas there's typically not, with the exception of O&M, compliance documentation required during occupancy. So wrapping up our LEED section, I thought it'd be interesting to take a little look at a tool we use at Glumac to help manage our certifications for LEED. So this is what we call a LEED scorecard, and this is a sample from a LEED version 4 building design and construction new construction scorecard, and this project is pursuing silver certification. So we can see here in these green columns, we have yes, maybe no, and no columns. And this is how we track the status of credit pursuits throughout the design and construction phases. And we help, get an at-a-glance read on where the project stands, if they need to pursue more points, if we are pursuing enough points to meet our goal, and what the open items are to determine feasibility for credits. A couple more things to point out here. You can see there's a column where we denote design and construction credits, where the bulk of the documentation happens in either design or construction to help indicate for the team what they need to pay attention to at any given moment in the project. And then on the right column here, we have an indicator where prerequisites are required, or where there's a value. These are points available for each credit. So a lot to look at here, but a sneak peek to how we operate a LEED project, and just one of our tools to help understand the status of the pursuit. Okay, so moving on to our next rating system, the Living Building Challenge. This one is always fun to talk about. It's I know a favorite for both Alissa and myself. So the Living Building Challenge, you may or may not have heard of, but it is created and administered by the International Living Future Institute. And like Alissa mentioned, the Living Building Challenge dares to ask the question, what does good look like? or what do buildings that do good look like? And ILFI's answer to this question would be that these buildings are regenerative, they are resilient and self-sufficient, and they provide positive impacts for humans and the community and the natural environment. So a lofty goal to be sure, but a great framework to be working in to meet sustainability goals. So we'll go through here a couple of the different pathways to pursue Living Building Challenge certification. These first two are zero certifications that we'll talk a little bit more about later. And these three here are three certification approaches project teams can take for the Living Building Challenge. The first is core certification, which is sort of the base level of certification with 10 core imperatives, where LEED has credit categories and prerequisites and credits. The Living Building Challenge has petals, core imperatives, and imperatives. So we have these core base level required imperatives here for the core certification. And then the next level is petal certification, which is aligned with the Living Building pilot program in Seattle that we'll talk a little bit more about later. Petal certification entails all core imperatives, plus all of the available imperatives within the water, energy, or materials petal. Next, we have full certification, which is really the gold standard of stringency in building certifications. This includes all 20 imperative and is quite stringent and difficult to meet. So very lofty goal, but includes a lot of really interesting sustainability strategies. So moving on to our next slide, we'll take a little bit of a closer look at how the Living Building Challenges, the rating system, breaks down. So as I mentioned, the Living Building Challenge includes petals, core imperatives, and imperatives. There are 7 petals in which all of the imperatives fall, and we'll just go through them quickly and their purpose. So first we have the place petal, for which the intent is to restore a healthy relationship with nature. We have the water petal, for which the intent is to operate within the water balance of the local ecology. We have the energy petal, for which the intent is to rely only on current solar income. We have the health and happiness petal, for which the purpose is to optimize physical and psychological well-being. We have the materials petal, for which the purpose is endorsing products that are safe for all species throughout time. And we have the equity petal, supporting a just and equitable world. And finally, we have the beauty petal, which celebrates design that uplifts the human spirit. Something else that I love about the beauty petal is the idea that future generations might perceive a beautiful building as more valuable or worth saving. So beyond the projected usable life of a building, we might see beautifully and thoughtfully constructed buildings have an even greater extended usable life through the importance that they impart architecturally and with their beauty for future generations. So interesting concepts there. As with LEED, we recommend engaging with Living Building Challenge as early as possible in pre-design. And the imperatives are tracked and documented throughout design and construction, but going beyond the Living Building Challenge for many of these imperatives also requires demonstration of compliance of imperatives through a 12-month performance period of full occupancy of the building. And I'll hand it off to Alissa to talk about WELL.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the WELL rating system really is more dialed in and focused on the health and wellness of the occupants within the buildings themselves. WELL is organized very similar to LEED, where we have our WELL bronze, silver, gold, and platinum levels of certification based upon the amount of points that you earn. And there are several different certification programs, but the one that we've still seen the most of is the WELL building standard, although there was definitely an uptake. I didn't get to work on any, but I know there was an uptake of that well health and safety rating, again, coming out of our pandemic, trying to address concerns of tenants within spaces and make sure that they felt protected within their working environments. So WELL really does take a holistic approach to the health in the built environment and addresses both behavior, operations, and design. It's the performance-based system, and so there is measuring that's required of the system in order to get certified, as well as like that monitoring piece to make sure that you are actually meeting the preconditions similar to prerequisites related to your air quality and water quality. I do actually believe these credit categories have been updated just slightly since we created this slide, unfortunately, but they have similar context. So WELL is focused in on your air quality. So again, making sure you're optimizing and achieving really good indoor air quality for your occupants, strategies to remove like airborne contaminants, and basically purify the air, make sure that everybody is breathing in very healthy air, which is a rising concern, I think, on our coast as we see more and more forest fires. Water quality also very important, like the quality of your water, so how much you're filtering the water, and also promoting access to water, and so placing strategic water stations, so just fresh, clean water is easily available to every occupant within the space. Nourishment is part of this, and so trying to make sure, one, you're providing healthy options for food within the space, but also through signage and things like that, you're encouraging people to choose the healthier option. Light, so really making sure that people are more in line with your body's typical circadian rhythms. And so being very thoughtful with things such as daylighting and lighting controls, as we know that that can really support just how somebody, how awake they feel within their environment. Fitness is a large part of the system. And so making sure you're utilizing the building design to create an active space. And so there's things such as creating like more like beautiful stairwells to encourage people to utilize stairwells and use less, creating like fitness or yoga rooms and for all occupants, and maybe even just like walking pathways if you're fortunate enough to have more building, like more actual site area and not just be in an urban core. Comfort is also part of this. So really trying to create work or home environments that people can feel productive in, or they can also feel comfortable in, like distraction-free environments. So looking in, like making sure acoustics are well, making sure like their thermal environment is well regulated, so people can be comfortable within their space. Also, mind is a part of this, so supporting mental and emotional health through different design elements. So creating places that people can kind of relax and meditate, kind of those places of refuge. If you're familiar with biophilic design concepts, go to feel safe and relax and kind of like reflect and take that little bit of mental break, which honestly helps with their energy levels and helps them be more productive employees as well. So similar to LEED, they're called preconditions instead of prerequisites. Last time the slide was updated, there are 23 preconditions, and a maximum of 110 points available through the array, the different credit categories there. This is a rating system we don't see incredibly frequently, but we have seen it in like hotel spaces. We have seen it in some office spaces and in some multifamily residential spaces that really want to promote that active, healthy lifestyle to their occupants that may be moving on in or to their hotel guests. So people that value that. We can move on to the Fitwel slide. So Fitwel, I consider well light only because there really isn't that metering portion is not a requirement. It could add to your points, but it's not required. In the Fitwel system, there are no prerequisites or preconditions. It's just a choose your own adventure. And so you can really dial in on what is important to you as an owner or what you think is going to be important to your occupants within the space and focus in more on those strategies. Fitwel was developed by the CDC and the GSA, and they really were strategic when developing the certification system. They gained input from experts in the public health and design community, and their points system is different than most any others because it's a weighted system. So each strategy has a unique point allocation based on the strength of the science and the demonstrated impact it would have on occupant health. So rather than see like 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, you see things like 4.13 points because it's just that weighted structure. Within the Fitwel system, these again, they're just really focused on creating those healthy spaces for occupants. One thing that I really like about this system is if you're designing an office building, you have building engineers and people that are working for the building themselves that sometimes get left out of the thought when you're creating that building. You're more focused on trying to attract tenants, trying to do right by your occupants, but not the people necessarily like working within the space, like for the building itself. And so when you are thinking through some of the requirements related to fitness spaces or related to providing break rooms or wellness spaces, such as meditation rooms or lactation rooms and things like that, you need to make sure they're accessible to the building engineers and like your receptionist and people that might not always have like thought out access to those spaces. And so it does take that extra lens of making sure everybody within that building is going to have equal access to amenities that are going to help them feel better within their work environment as well. Let's see, there's again, when you're looking at this, this does go to the outdoor spaces. So making sure you're connecting with the community, providing like good seating spaces. It does allow you to take credit for being close to public parks that the occupants of your space would have easy access to. So amenities that are local to your building, you get credit for, much like you would in LEED with the location and transportation credits. But yeah, it's a rating system that we are starting to see an uptick in because there really has been that added focus on healthy spaces. I've even seen some developers go as far as starting to include this as like a mandatory building requirement when they are building new spaces. And I've seen it referenced in like ESG reporting and things like that. So this is a certification I'm starting to see that uptick in. You can go to the next slide. So Fitwel certification, again, just a little different in the levels of certification. You have your 1, 2, and 3-star, 3-star being the highest achieving certification. I do see most at this point go after 2 stars, or I've even seen buildings that are just really utilizing this as good design practices to go into a building, even if they don't fully go through with the certification. Maybe kind of like a Fitwel add on to a LEED certification to make sure you're really dialed in on the health and wellness of the occupants.
Okay, So that's a good segue to our next slide on net zero certifications. So we'll take a closer look at just a few. There are two on the screen. I mentioned briefly in the LBC section, zero energy certification and zero carbon certification. We also have one each for energy and carbon from USGBC. So this is a sort of rapidly developing sector, but we'll go through the current requirements of these four briefly. So for LEED Net Zero Energy and Zero Energy certification from ILFI, they both require a 12-month performance period demonstrating their claim that they are net zero energy and using only renewable energy on site. So that's the base requirement for the LEED Net Zero Energy certification is just 100% renewable energy use for a 12-month performance period. Whereas the ILFI Zero Energy certification also requires 100% renewable energy for a 12-month performance period, but also requires that energy to be generated on site and also does not permit any combustion equipment on the site. Now, moving on to the zero carbon section, we have for the LEED zero carbon requirement, I believe that this has been recently updated to expand the scope of operational carbon to not only include operational carbon from on-site energy use, but also consider fugitive emissions from refrigerant leakage, on-site combustion equipment, embodied carbon from construction and renovations, and transportation, all within the scope of that 12-month performance period. So great to see how the scope of carbon emissions accounting expands as the market learns more and matures in our methods for understanding operational carbon use. For the ILFI zero carbon certification, this has a requirement for embodied carbon from the standpoint of new construction build or a major renovation project. The carbon requirement is a 20% reduction in embodied carbon through LCA analysis as compared with a baseline building. And then a one-time offset of all of the embodied carbon footprint associated with that construction. Also, in addition to those embodied carbon requirements, demonstration through a 12-month performance period of 100% renewable energy that may be on or off-site procured, and also no combustion allowed. So those sort of trends, insofar as the on and off-site renewable energy and no combustion equipment, really speak to those embedded requirements that are in line with ILFI's philosophy, as with the Living Building Challenge, whereas the USGBC programs right now are a bit more straightforward. Now I'll hand it off to Alissa to take us through a host of other building certifications.
Yes, this is going to be a very light touch. So some of the certifications that we have been, I guess, seeing start to trend are included on this list. So locally, the Evergreen Sustainable Development Standard, ESDS, we see this being applied to affordable housing projects. It's kind of tied to their funding mechanisms within Washington State. And so there's several projects that have been pursuing this, and it has a lot of the same general measures within it that would be considered maybe a LEED light building, I would say. And it's also a design-based, like design standard versus there's not the proven performance aspect of this one. But trying to make sure, I think just the state's trying to make sure that our affordable housing projects are not being forgotten about and still have ways to receive funding through implementing lower lying fruit sustainability measures, I would say. Although I guess to receive funding, it can be a bit competitive. So I definitely see projects going above and beyond the minimum requirements here. Another one that we've been running into with a lot of our work at universities is ASHI STARS. And so this is a certification that is about advanced sustainability in higher education. And so most universities out there, at least locally or on the West Coast, I see, and I think we're probably the West Coast and the Northeast are kind of leading the way with this. But universities like to get competitive with each other, so it's fun to review who like the report out of who's really leading the way with different measures within HE stars. Um, and so that one's, yeah, university focused. Passive house certification. We've started to see an uptick in this, not necessarily within our local market, although it is an option for Seattle's green building standards. So maybe we can convince some of you to start looking towards the certification. But it became a way to meet code over in Massachusetts. And so we've been helping out on some passive house related projects there. And so this is really, really dialed in and focused on the envelope design and installing ERVs for the most part. This was predominantly a certification that started out with like single family homes, but it has really been expanding recently to include more larger multifamily projects and even office type projects. So really, again, kind of you can tell by its name, but focused on passive design elements. And yeah, it's a good one. Another one locally is the Envision certification. This one, all of our like rapid ride I lines and H lines within Seattle have been pursuing Envision certification. So this is really focused on infrastructure projects, so more your transportation focused projects. The Metro bus electrification that's happening is going to be pursuing Envision Platinum certification. So trying to see kind of expand out of just like the building environment and go more towards like roadways and um, things like that. Roadways, bridges, more of the infrastructure. There's also Energy Star and Green Globes, but we can move on to the next slide.
Okay, so now that we've heard a little bit about a wide variety of rating systems, we can talk a little bit more about the incentives and compliance pathways in the Pacific Northwest and specifically in the Seattle market. Like Alissa mentioned, SDCI's Green Building Standard, in short, developments can comply with Green Building Standard via certification of one of these listed here at the levels indicated. In which FIAS is the same as FIAS or passive house is an option, and we see a lot of projects required to comply with the Green Building Standard, pursuing LEED Gold or Living Building Pilot Program, or ESDS and Built Green, as Alissa mentioned, very common for low-income housing or affordable housing projects. So there are a couple of different ways in which green building standard may apply to a project. One is through land use code. So buildings in certain locations, usually in close proximity to the downtown urban core, are typically required to meet the green building standard over certain size and density thresholds. So many multifamily or office developments, in reasonable close proximity to downtown will be required to comply. But also projects may get additional green priority permit expedition. They either if they are required to meet land use code, or I believe if they elect to meet the green building standard, they can get faster permit review timelines. Additionally, there's the Seattle Living Building Challenge pilot program. So the requirement for the pilot program is to achieve core certification and pedal certification. So that's all imperatives, all core imperatives and all imperatives in either the energy, water, or materials pedal for Living Building Challenge. And there are a couple of other requirements for the Living Building pilot program specific to Seattle. I believe it's 25% below baseline EUI performance, as well as no potable water use allowed for toilet irrigation and cooling tower makeup water. So a couple of Seattle specific requirements in addition to the living building challenge requirements there. And the benefit for the pilot program is additional floor area ratio allowances and additional height. Lastly, we have the Bellevue and Bellred land use incentives. So similar to the Green Building Standard, there's sort of a list of building certifications and certification levels that grant you compliance with these land use incentives within Bellevue and Bell Redmond. So similarly to the pilot program and Green Building Standard, projects may be awarded floor area ratio bonuses, and it may also lower their minimum parking requirements. So, beyond the host of value that building certifications can add to a new development and information that owners can garner and data collection and being prepared for incoming legislation and code requirements, there are a couple of other bonuses to consider in a new development in the pursuit of certification. So now that we've gone through a host of rating systems and reasoning to pursue them, Alissa and I have a couple of case studies of projects we've worked on at Glumac to review with you all. I believe we have a couple of projects that have completed their certifications and a couple that are currently in design. So I think Alissa will kick us off with North Lake Commons.
Yeah, North Lake Commons is a project that was designed by Weber Thompson, and it was Hess Callahan and Gray developers in combination with Dunn Lumber as the owners for the project. This project received LEED Platinum certification under Core and Shell earlier this year, and kind of fun, I guess, early design story related to this one. This project was very originally, in our kickoff, we were pursuing the Living Building pilot program for this project early on. But then we all experienced the pandemic, which led project goals to kind of shift, and based upon not wanting to design another office building within an environment that just was already, people are starting to filter out of the office. And so the owners were concerned about just designing more office type space when we already have a lot of open office buildings within Seattle marketplace. So with that, there was a design shift to go from just an office building to an office building that could support life science within it. And because there's not a good energy baseline for a lab life science type building, that kind of precluded us from continuing to pursue the living building certification, because it's very reduced your energy use by 25% when there's just not enough data out there on what an EUI actually looks like for lab type buildings, because they're varied, very large. But we did have all of that initial kickoff that included a biophilic workshop. It included a heavy focus on health and wellness of the occupants and how we were really going to make sure that the building reflected the community and brought in the community. So all of those good aspects from the living building challenge were brought in to the design of this building, which did make the achieving of our LEED Platinum a little bit easier, although a Platinum project always has its challenges. Really, honestly, the biggest highlight of this building for me is the very inherent biophilia within the project. It is mass timber, and so just the wood throughout the project, you can breathe it in. It feels like you're in a forest. Was actually designed to make you feel like you were hiking through the forest, and there's multi levels of just wood structure and bridges among it, and kind of a meandering pathway through middle that has just really great landscaping. It is designed to just there, it's very, very efficient in terms of the water. So just a really great fixture selection, but also they are treating tons of the stormwater that are flowing down from kind of that Fremont neighborhood, flowing on down into the project and filtering all of that water through their great stormwater features before it goes into Lake Union. Very efficient energy systems, and just this project overall, they were very dialed in, and it was a great project team that made achieving platinum very easy. And we achieved platinum without any renewable energy credits or offsets, like the offsets, which I've never been on a project that was been able to do it without relying on RECs. So thanks to the really just great design of the project and good project team. I will pass it over to Grace.
Thanks, Alyssa. Okay, so taking a look at Horizon House West Tower. Now, this is a project that is currently in design that we're working on the LEED certification for. It's a senior living high-rise tower project in First Hill, pursuing LEED Gold certification for building design and construction, new construction. So this has been a fun project to work on. It's again for a senior living facility. There's an existing campus there, and this is a new tower within their existing campus. So they are currently operating, and they have a really great team of concerned staff, but also really great community engagement of residents. And there's a lot of folks in the room with a lot of great ideas. So it's been a fun project to dig into early, uh, and as well as the occupant engagement, the project team and the owners have a lot of concerns around occupant experience in this building, and occupant comfort and well-being is paramount to them. So that has been a great avenue to integrate into a range of LEED credit pursuits. You can see in these renderings here just some of the green space that will be provided on the site. Although this is a zero lot line tower project, there are many terraced green space areas. So this project will be pursuing the Protect or Restore Habitat credit via a diverse, native, and adaptive landscaping, and also planting of pollinator species. It will achieve the open space credit again with expansive open green space, encouraging activity and education and exercise, as well as gardening spaces for the residents. And will also achieve heat island reduction again through the expansive green space. This project is also carefully selecting fixtures, again, concerning occupant comfort and the needs of their residents, fixtures that will work well for them, planning to achieve a 38% indoor water use reduction below baseline. And again, as with occupant experience and comfort, there's a big focus on selecting low emitting and healthy materials, maximizing daylight and quality views that this great location and sort of building massing affords us. And also back to the sort of resident engagement aspect, there's a resident community sustainability group that's really interested in social equity and how they can engage with the community in a social equity context. So that has provided us the perfect avenue to pursue a pilot credit to that end. So again, it's great to have an engaged and excited team who can really find value and put a plan to pen and paper to achieve something that is valuable to them within the framework of the LEED rating system. And lastly, this building is engaging in life cycle impact reduction and currently forecasting a 10% impact reduction below a baseline in global warming potential of materials. So definitely a fun project to be working on, and we'll be glad to see it break ground. I'll pass it back to Alyssa for 400 Westlake.
Yeah. Next project I'm going to be highlighting. This project is built but not certified. In order to, again, certify a project that is pursuing Living Building Challenge Pedal certification, the building needs to be at 85% occupancy for a year to have your post-occupancy, like basically data trended to show that we are offsetting more energy than we are utilizing. And also for this one, that we are not using any potable water for our non-potable uses. So this project is pursuing the pilot program through the city. We are waiting on it to be like occupied by more tenants. We have a tenant on the top floor of it, which is great, and they've been loving the space. But yes, we're still just kind of in that hold pattern at the moment. This project, the three pedals that it pursued are the energy pedal, the place pedal, and the beauty pedal. This, I do want to say, is under the older version of Living Building Challenge, so version 3.1, which did not have core imperatives yet included within it. So we did not have to meet core imperatives related to water or materials or equity, versus the project that Grace will touch base on right after this. We are having to focus in on all of those core imperatives, and it is making it a fun process. So again, this project has very efficient systems. It's utilizing 35% less energy than a typical office building. It does have on-site PV, but because it's located within the dense urban environment, it's impossible to install an on-site solar array large enough to offset 105% of the energy needs for a building of this size. And so there is a huge 1.5 megawatt array that is installed down in Prineville, Oregon. Seems kind of far away, but it's actually within our same regional energy grid. And it's doing a lot more good there than it would do locally. Since we have such a clean source of energy locally, Prineville, Oregon isn't the same, and it's just a more natural gas intensive grid down there. And so by producing clean energy down there, it's actually, I think, having more of a benefit. For this project, we are capturing 100% of our rainwater, and we are also capturing gray water from showers and lavatories. This is all being stored in a giant 105,000 gallon cistern in the garage, and will be treated before being pumped back into the building and utilized to meet our flushing demands and our irrigation demands. This project really did a great job of celebrating a sense of place by maintaining the historic Firestone facade. So if you're walking down on Westlake and you do not look up, it just has the old facade there. And I know that was a lot of work for Lee Crutcher Lewis, the general contractors, to maintain during the construction of the building. But it really does create that nice sense of place. Also, as part of this project, there's a nice pea patch that was developed off-site, kind of over close to the REI, in between our site and REI. And so that pea patch was created as part of the place pedal to add more like green space of native species. And so people are actively utilizing that pea patch, maybe not right now because it's not quite season, but that pea patch was actually designed with the materials credit in mind. And so thinking like all red list free materials when that was designed, because the project wasn't sure at that point if it was pursuing the energy. But yeah, so we are basically anxiously awaiting tenants for this one, and to be able to really start tracking its energy and water performance and help it make its way through its performance year. And I think I saw Jess online, who I know you're very anxious on this one too. So be on the lookout. All right, Grace.
Okay, I'll bring us on home with 3000 Western. 3000 Western is also currently in design. This project is also pursuing the Living Building pilot program, but as Alissa mentioned, this is following the current version of Living Building Challenge, version 4. So this is a multifamily project in Belltown, directly opposite the sculpture park. So really interesting and rich site in historic context. So this has been an interesting project to work on. As Alissa mentioned, the core, the requirements of the core imperatives have expanded as with the new iteration of Living Building Challenge. So there has been a lot of new ground to cover for this project. Similar to 400 Westlake, this building has very aggressive water reuse strategies. There's a fun element in the garage, in the parking spiral. There's actually the rainwater cistern in the middle of the spiral. It's a 30,000 gallon rainwater cistern, in addition to the gray water collection, treatment, and reuse system. So this building is actually plans to collect, I believe, all gray water sources, uh, showers, lavatories, and washing machines. So a lot of great water use or reuse on this site. Also, under materials, this building will use 50% of its timber as FSC certified wood, and it is a timber framed building, so it's quite a bit of FSC wood. Also, 20% of the materials by cost will come within, I believe, it's 500 kilometers of the site considered local materials. And also will divert 80% of its construction waste. Um, Also, a new requirement with the newer version of the Living Building Challenge and the pilot program, this building will be required to engage in resilience planning to plan to be habitable for 7 days in a complete power outage emergency. So, working through strategies to make sure we maintain a healthy and safe environment for occupants in that scenario. This project also will meet net positive carbon, both through low carbon materials and low operational energy use, and by a one-time carbon offset of the development carbon footprint. This development is also engaging in some really fun and interesting beauty and biophilia elements. Lissa and I have been working with the project team on a host of beauty and biophilia initiatives and sort of tracking them through design iterations. Alissa, feel free to chime in with any strategies you can think of. I know that there's at least one here on Eagle Street that's sort of an art installation that's mirroring the sculpture park opposite. And as you can see here, there's in this rendering, there's quite a bit of green space, including an occupied roof, in which there will be trees up on those levels, so that from the street you can see the understory. It'll be pretty interesting. Um, Also, the project will engage in education and inspiration elements in creating signage, sort of celebrating the sustainability aspects of the building. There's even discussion, I think, currently happening on how we can provide views to the gray water reuse infrastructure, like an internal window for occupants can get a sneak peek into the purple pipe and the treatment skid. So definitely a challenging and fun new framework to be working through these concepts in. Uh, Alissa, anything to add for 3000 Western?
You did a great job summarizing it.
Okay. Well, that is our last case study. So want to make sure we leave some time for questions. Alissa and my contact information is up on the screen here, and we'll make sure you all have access to that, and don't hesitate to reach out to either of us for any questions on this presentation or other questions regarding sustainability and decarbonization.
Yeah, and I'll start kind of, I've been answering some questions on the fly. If I didn't give you a thorough enough answer, feel free to email me and I can add some more to it. Trying to keep the answers somewhat brief. But yeah, we can kind of go through some of those outstanding questions. The first one I see, Grace, maybe you can address this with related to the net zero certification systems, is what does net zero ready mean?
Sorry, I expanded my screen to see the chat and my mute button went away. Um, I believe net zero ready refers to the building is set up to be net zero ready, but refers to the point before the performance period in which they're able to demonstrate through 12 months of occupancy and energy use that that requirement has actually been met. I believe that's the case, but I would need to verify and can confirm.
I think that's right with a certification system. Net zero ready could also, I've heard people utilize it just in the term as they've kind of installed all of the infrastructure needed ahead of installing like
Mm,
PV panels. But that wouldn't be like applicable to the systems, the rating
hmm.
systems Grace was talking about.
Yeah, we see solar ready required by code often, if not on-site solar required.
Mhm. And then I see the one of how closely does Washington State Climate Commitment Act and Seattle's BEPS follow LEED Zero in energy and or carbon. And I would say those standards are really about starting to go from natural gas-based systems to pushing for electrification um, in especially in our existing buildings. And so there's not any sort of like it's not going to push the bar ever to be, I think, that zero standard. But just by making that switch from natural gas based systems to electric, the emissions profiles of those buildings drastically decrease. And so it might make it possible to achieve through things like on site and probably a combination of on-site and off-site PV. Again, it's very hard for most buildings to be able to completely offset their energy use on site. So to actually get to like a zero energy building, it would be beyond just electrification and starting to look towards the renewable energy component.
I'm gonna interrupt really quick. Excuse me. So would you say that kind of the differences, um, BEPS and the energy reduction, that's more for existing buildings, and certification is way easier to do when you're developing a new building. So that's kind of they kind of intersect, but not in an easy way.
Yeah, I would say it when you are having to go through like your BEPS like whether it does mean you're electrifying or it just means you're looking through efficiency standards because you were lucky and you're already in an all electric space, I think that is an ideal time to start looking into a certification such as lead operations and maintenance because you already are looking at those systems and trying to reduce the energy use. And again, that's like a tracking based one. So you're basically scored based upon how much you reduce your energy versus a typical baseline building. That would look beyond just energy, though. Operations and maintenance starts to look at water and starts to look at kind of like programming of your building. So there's things such as um, looking at like your pest plans and your green cleaning policies. Like there's policies involved in it beyond just operations. It's also a waste focused as well, but a
That
good
makes sense.
opportunity.
Thank you.
I see a question. Can you explain more about offsite renewable offsets work? So they work differently, I think, with different programs. For instance, on our project, we actually physically installed an offsite array for that one. So that energy, yes, it's not directly being generated for our building, but within the regional grid, it's producing enough energy to completely offset the load that our building will emit once occupied. Other renewable energy credits are a pathway that we see projects that are kind of on this cusp of between certification levels. So if you need just a couple of points between, say, silver and gold or gold and platinum, we often see the purchasing of renewable energy credits. And so this is purchasing of credits for systems that are already existing, ideally new systems, because you get more credit for newer systems elsewhere. And so basically that offsite grid energy that it's producing gets applied back to your project in credits. And they can't be used for any other building or any other usage. It's kind of like you bought a portion of a grid, essentially, is the best way to look at it.
I see a question from Amanda on the resilience strategies used on 3000 Western. Uh, so that's a little bit of an open-ended imperative language from LVC. So the habitable for 7 days is sort of the open-ended prompt in which project teams are sort of asked to address in reasonable means how they're meeting that. So a couple of the recommended strategies are for the project to provide an energy hub via the on-site renewable energy and battery backup storage. Another is to provide community services such as emergency food or warming or cooling shelters for the broader community. And specifically on 3000 Western, now our preliminary approaches, we're still in design, so still finalizing things, but we've been looking at passive survivability through thermal comfort, insofar as thermal comfort modeling of the building, to understand what our hottest days might look like in a calendar year, in the units most susceptible to heat, and vice versa for cold, and assuring or trying to see if we can implement passive strategies to maintain habitable temperatures throughout the building. And right now, it's our expectation through thermal comfort modeling that we are able to do that. So we believe that we can maintain passive survivability without powering up heating and cooling systems, which is great. But additionally, there will be emergency power provisions provided in sort of specific buildings, specific rooms throughout the building, to provide emergency charging tools and emergency refrigeration for like medication and breast milk. And we've got provisions planned in there for emergency water use and sort of protocols planned for communication with tenants. So those are some of the strategies 3000 Western is currently targeting to demonstrate how they will remain habitable for 7 days.
All right. Were there any other questions you wanted to address? While you're looking, I'm going to share one last slide from City Light, just to let everybody know. Speaking of passive house, briefly, City Light does a $900 per unit incentive for multifamily new construction buildings that are passive house certified. And then that's not on this slide, but just to let everybody know, the Built Smart multifamily program we've had for a long time and CNI new construction programs are going to sunset as we know them in 2025. So if you've got a project that's already been permitted with the 2015 Seattle Energy Code, call City Light right now if you haven't to make sure you get all the incentives that you're eligible for. And then in 2025, a new program called Energy Design Assistance is going to come online. We'll have more details of that later, but that's going to be for those buildings that have been permitted through the 2018 and 2021 energy codes. All right, any other questions come in?
I think we've answered all of them.
All right. Great. Thank you so much. It's when you go and look to find information about building certifications, at least from my perspective, you go to the website and you see all the marketing things, and it's like, but what really am I going to be looking for? So having a presentation on just like the core of what these are was really helpful to me. So thank you both for coming and talking to us. And my colleague Robert and I were talking about Passive House earlier, so we might have to get you on the phone and talk a little bit more about that, maybe for a presentation later.
Sounds good.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today, and maybe we'll see you at the Iron Battery one in December. If not, have a good rest of your year, and we will see you next year. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.